and explores what the mighty buck means to all of us. Go to cbc.ca/thecurrent for more.
Hi, I'm Sukyin Lee from DNTO. My question to you is this: what is one of the most difficult things you survived?
My husband and I and our 2 kids, we sailed across the South Pacific from Panama to the Galapagos. We hit really bad storm. It was one of the worst storms of the season. Not only did we have the bad storm and the torrential rain, but the boat started to fall apart a bit. So being a mother and having 2 children there, at one point my husband, he was the captain and he had been up for so long that he finally needed to take a nap. So he went down below and we were up in the weather, myself and my 2 kids. They were at 10 and 8. And we were all tethered in life jackets into the cockpit. And we had the door closed because the torrential rain would have come down below. So we had everything hatched up. At one point, my daughter said, why don't I get some snacks? So she was going to go down below, and I was helping her open the door. And as we opened the door, smoke came up. And right where my husband was laying, something was actually on fire. So luckily, we woke him up, and he was able to put the fire out and come up on deck. And it just made us realize that, okay, the risks that we're taking right now are bigger than we ever anticipated. Finally, we did something that you call heaving to, where you can actually stop the boat and just take a breath. Being able to heave to in the middle of a storm sort of calm the boat down, and all of us to go down below together and have a family meeting. Once you step out of the storm, even going down below and closing the hatch and taking off the wet jackets and warming your hands, it does change the whole perspective, and you feel a difference in how you're moving about. So it was really conscious about, okay, we just have a second. In my husband's face at that point, he's always the voice of calm, and he's the rock. And he looked like, what am I doing out here with my family in the middle of this? Is this worth it? I think at any time you have to constantly be asking yourself the benefit, pros versus cons, and what the next step needs to be. The goal wasn't actually sailing to New Zealand. The goal was actually having a safe adventure. And we figured the best thing for our family was to go back to Panama and fix all the issues.
Way to survive that. I'm so glad you were able to get through that storm. Well done.
Thanks. Nice talking to you.
Holy smokes. It is amazing the kinds of survival stories people that you meet while you're walking down the street have tucked under their belts. A sailing mom battles the high seas and survives. Today on DNTO, we will find out exactly what it takes to get past those life or death moments when your survivor instinct kicks in, or maybe it doesn't. Whether you're trying to stay afloat on a burning boat, or you're on an airplane on the tarmac fending off a hijacker, or swimming for your life from a sinking cruise ship, well, it's not just about superheroes and castaways in extreme situations, because there are all kinds of everyday difficulties that are tough to endure. So stick around, because we'll offer you some handy-dandy survival advice to get you through anything. This is DNTO, tossing you a life preserver. Everything will be all right. Our next storyteller is a bona fide survival expert. Caleb Musgrave grew up learning traditional Ojibwe survival techniques from his dad, and now he teaches wilderness survival. A few years ago, Caleb had to use his know-how to save his own life during a solo camping trip in the dead of winter.
I was up west of Algonquin Park and north of Huntsville on some crown land, and there was a small lake, and when I was out there, I decided I needed to get some firewood. And I saw this small island probably 200-300 yards off the shore. And it was about mid-February, so you're in this very deep snow. There's a lot of cold out there. It was about minus 40, minus 45. It's cold. So any amount of firewood that's easy to bring back to camp is better than nothing. And you need to load up like the size of a truck a night just to make sure that you make it through the night warm, especially in that temperature. And so I looked at the risk and I figured, well, it's been minus 40 for at least a week up here. It should be safe enough to cross. So I put on my boots, I picked up my axe, I picked up my saw, I had a little knife hanging from my neck, I had another knife on my belt, and I had a fire starting device, because you always carry those things no matter what. And I started crossing. And about halfway across, I stepped onto soft ice, and I stepped on it with both feet. and I went through right up to my waist, probably right up to my belly button. And I put my arms out behind me and I fell back, because that's what you do. You know, behind you is solid ice. You don't know how solid the ice is in front of you, so you don't want to fall forward. So you want to kind of fall back when you start to fall into the lake. And I pushed with my elbows and basically slid myself back out of the water, almost backpedaling. My upper body was mostly dry, so my core was fairly safe, but my feet were soaked, and up into my belly button I was soaked. And so I had to cross. I had to do something. Going back, I don't have much firewood at the camp. I know I'm not going to be able to make it back there faster. My boots are filled with water. And that was the scariest part, was I could turn my feet into a block of ice. And I look at myself and I know ahead of me there's firewood. And I know there's enough firewood to burn for a long time. So I weigh my options very quickly, because my hands are starting to get numb. My body is starting to get cold, well, very cold. And I push through. I basically go around where I fell through, and I kept punching with my axe into the ice, trying to see where it's safe. And I cross over, and I get to the island, and I knock over a bunch of these dead standing pines, and I push all the brush together in a pile, and I see a dead standing birch tree. I just grabbed onto a sheet of it and just ripped, and this huge sheet came off, and I threw it right on top of the pile of brush I made, and I just took my little sparking rod and threw a big shower of sparks into the middle of that birch bark, and it erupted into flames. And I basically stripped down to my base layer and just stand there for hours, slowly putting those layers back on, drying them out on my body while they're hanging around the fire while I'm trying to dry my first layer off. And I put that next layer on, stand there by the fire drying, and then put the last layers on. And this took probably 4.5, maybe 5 hours. And I'd went over there around noon, so it's already dark, and I have to go back to my camp. And that was probably the most terrifying part, was the idea of having to cross that ice again, and now it's pitch black. And I grabbed a bunch of birch bark, and I grabbed a bunch of little twigs from all the other trees that were still standing there, and I grabbed my axe, and I walked back to the camp. The main reason I went back to the camp was I had food. I have to go back and consume as much calories as I can to keep me going through the night. It was truly terrifying in a lot of ways, because I was so close to hypothermia, and it takes a long time to recover from that stuff. And I get back, and I went into my food collection, which was things like rice and flour, a couple of rabbits that I had trapped in snares, and I basically took all those things, threw them into a pot of water, and boiled it, and ate it. I ate almost everything I had in one go, and I drank all the broth, and then I took pine needles and cedar needles and threw them into the water and boiled a tea, and threw in a couple of tea bags and threw in a handful of coffee and boiled that all up into this horrible concoction, and drank it all down as much as I could, as fast as I could, to make up for all the calories I had wasted trying to get out of that water, warm myself up, and come back. Once I finished eating, I pretty much went into a catatonic state. I just basically went into a coma, and for 2 days I was asleep. It humbles you when the ground beneath you is no longer there. It humbles you. When you're so close to death, when you can't bring your fingers close enough together to actually touch, that humbles you. The modern human is not the master out there. If you're playing man versus wild, wild's going to win.
Wise words from a man who knows what he's talking about. That is Caleb Musgrave. Caleb teaches survival skills through his company, Canadian Bushcraft. So stick around, because Caleb will return with more lessons learned in the Canadian wild.
It's still hard because
Your ancestors overcame astronomical odds to survive, all leading to this moment. This moment where you get the luxury of listening to this episode of DNTO.
I'm Sukyun Lee, and this is DNTO, where we sometimes experience turbulence and find out what we're really made of. Our next storyteller is an extraordinary woman named Nicole Foran. 5 years ago, she was a flight attendant with CanJet Airlines, and she was working a regular route, Halifax to Montego Bay, Jamaica, and back. One particular day, the plane was on the tarmac in Montego Bay. Nicole was at the back of the plane as passengers started loading from the front.
We were handing out custom cards in the back of the aircraft, me and one other flight attendant, when we were approached by startled passengers stating that there was a man on board with a gun. They were looking really frantic, so Carolina and I decided to separate, and she went to the front of the aircraft to see what was going on. Meanwhile, I went to the back with my other 2 flight attendants and scared passengers. I couldn't see what was going on. I could hear yelling, and my crew members were getting scared because of the commotion that was going on. And one of them was actually her very first flight. And all of a sudden, I'm looking up, and I can see a clear image now of the gunman holding the gun. And he's yelling, and he takes a shot. He shoots the gun. At that moment, sheer panic breaks out in the aircraft. I have more and more passengers piling up in the back, like sitting on top of each other, crying and asking me to please let them out of the aircraft. And I told them I couldn't let them out because I didn't know what was going to happen if we opened up the doors. But I promised them that I would get them off, and I just told them to please just calm down and be patient with me, and I will get them home. At that moment, Carolina, who was the flight attendant up front with him the whole time, she called me up and said that he was aware that there was 3 flight attendants in the back of the aircraft and that he wanted one of us to come up to the front. And we just stared at each other blankly because none of us wanted to go. Within a few seconds afterwards, Carolina called again and said that he really wanted somebody up here now. I hung up the phone and I walked up. I don't know why I did it. All I know is that it was a bad situation. I didn't want to make it any worse, and I figured if everybody was still okay at this point, maybe they'll be fine once I get up front and maybe we can get them off the aircraft. He was standing facing me at the very front of the aisle, pointing the gun at me and watching me walk up to the front. He kind of had an empty look in his eyes. I think he was scared because now things had gotten serious where he shot the gun. I'm scared. I don't know what's going to happen at this point. So as I'm getting closer to him, he is asking me my name. And I told him my name is Nicole. And he said, turn around and go make them come closer to the front. He said, I don't want anybody sitting back there. So I did as he said. I turned around and I looked at my passengers that were scared, and I asked them to please listen to me, that everything was going to be fine, just to please get up and come and sit in the chairs. I'm being very calm. I'm not showing them that I'm scared so that everybody else remains calm. And that's how I was for the whole time. I was just calm. I was like I wasn't even in my own body, and I just acted like everything was going to be fine. And he started talking about wanting money, and we just kept talking to him and asking him like what exactly you were looking for, and he said, I just want their money. He said, I want to take all their money because I want to get out of Jamaica. And we said, well, in order for you to get the money, we will demand their money, but they're not going to give up money unless you let them go. So at that time, he agreed to let the passengers go in exchange for their money. I felt relieved that we were able to at least get these passengers off because there was children on board, and there was also a hearing impaired group that was on board. And I promised my passengers in the back when it all started that I was going to get them off this plane and get them home. Carolina got a plastic bag, and I'm holding this bag open, and we're just screaming, leave everything behind, drop your money, and get off the plane. They all just immediately got up grabbing money that they have, and the other people beside them didn't have money. They were handing each other money so that all the passengers would have something to give the hijacker. And some of them were still trying to grab their baggage in the overhead compartments. We're like, no, drop it and go. You need to get off this plane. And as they're dropping money, like, they're looking at us with tears in their eyes and crying and saying that they were sorry because they were leaving us behind. And they just kept running off and running off. And as the last of the passengers came off, the 2 crew members that were in the back with me at the beginning came to the front. We sat down in chairs, and he informed the male flight attendant that we had to go close the door. When the door shut closed, I lost hope. I first thought this was it, and I didn't know how I was going to get home. So we're in the aircraft now, trapped with the hijacker, and there's 5 of us there.